Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Welcome to Tales of the Sail, episode 30B. We're here to talk about Historicon. We have a lot to cover, and we have a special guest. So I'm going to do the introductions and kind of take us around the horn because we're all broadcasting from different spots. I am Tom Chairborne Mullane. I am joined by the regulars, Tyler, Masterful Demo Maker Stone.
Hi. We need better nicknames, man.
Yeah, I need better nicknames for you. Glenn, Gentleman Farmer Van Meter.
Hello.
And we're joined by a special guest, new player, but good enough to beat the pants off me in the Sea tournament, Andy Hodges.
Hi, how's it going?
So Andy, we got to meet him in person. I think Glenn has met him before, but I had not met Andy in person until we got to meet at Historicon. So Andy, tell us a little bit about your other podcasting experiences, because you mentioned to us that this is old hat for you. You've done this before.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tales of the Sail, and I mentioned that besides being a new-ish Blood and Plunder player, I do a lot of podcasting. I'm on 3 regular shows on the Where They May radio network. I have a show called Ending Pending where we cover one-season TV shows, and we're going to be doing Crusoe soon, which is a terrible pirate show. So if you want to watch me slowly go insane, go check that out. And I'm on an RPG show called Good Neighbors if you like tabletop RPGs. And those are the 2 probably relevant things to your guys' audience.
Now, what system do you use for that, or is it not system-based?
For Good Neighbors, we use Monster of the Week. So it's kind of an urban fantasy horror campaign.
Nice.
I just finished a campaign of that was set in the 1920s in a town not far from me. It was a lot of fun.
Love that. I love doing fun, like, historical settings with it. It's really fun system to adapt, so.
I played a couple different RPG systems, and I think I loved Call of Cthulhu.
So
The whole atmosphere is fun, and also a lot of the towns that it makes reference to are basically like down the road from me.
I was gonna make an Innsbruck joke about Tyler's small town nearby, but I would have to guess that if Tyler was going to use a nearby town, it might be Centralia.
No, we actually used, I think I mentioned it while we were at Historicon, we used Marietta, which is outside of Lancaster.
Yeah.
It used to be, it was a stopover for the mob. So Al Capone owned some stuff in there. There was a large bootlegging industry run out of a washing machine factory. But it also has a lot of really weird folklore from like the Amish. So it was a really good setting to use for Monster of the Week because just weird Amish witchcraft stories and stuff.
Our game is set in Louisiana, and listeners keep like messaging us about like being in Louisiana, and I'm like, no, like we're in Philly, New Jersey, and Maryland. Like we have never been to Louisiana. We just picked it because of the New Orleans vibes. I'm so sorry. We are not locals.
New Orleans got great vibes.
It does have good vibes.
So speaking of good vibes, we are freshly back from Historicon. Mitch last week released kind of the jumbo episode where we interviewed a ton of people, game designers, publishers, different people at the booth. He had a couple of game designers that talked about. We were all over the place. I was there for some of it, but not all of it because Mitch just Mitch never stops talking, and I'm confident in saying that because I know that since I'm editing this, I don't know that Mitch is going to listen to it, so I'm free to kind of dump on Mitch, which I look forward to doing in this podcast.
I did want to point out, I have recovered from my flapjacking incident.
Oh, that's great to hear, Glenn. I learned so many new words from Mitch every time we room together in a hotel. So I got plenty of stories in that regard later on. But Andy, tell us about your Historicon experience. So this isn't the first time you've been there, is it? Or
So last year it was in November, and I was sitting at home kind of lamenting that I wasn't there, and my partner was like, "Babe, just go up for the day. Like it's not too far of a drive. You could probably get there and back in a day." So I went for one day last year and had a blast. I just ran demos for people, and I played a game against Mike last year, which was pretty cool to get to like play the creator of the game.
what were you playing for the most part?
I just brought my Paragua and a 100-point list, and Mike was like, "Yeah, if, like the tournament already happened, but if you want to like post up at the table and just run demos for people, go for it." So I did not know what I was doing. I did not know the rules well enough to be running demos, but two people that I ran demos for last year like went and bought in at the Firelock booth after playing me, so that was kind of cool.
Did you see them again this year?
I did not, although I have seen the one person post up in the Discord a handful of times. So
Oh, nice.
I was like, I'm your dad. I'm your pirate dad. So this year I've been playing quite a bit of solo games for the Summer of Plunder, and with Historicon coming up on the 4th of July sale, I was like, I'm gonna drop bank and really build out my list, my French army. So I bought 16 flibustiers and 16 Malise des Caribibes. I don't speak French. I'm sorry.
That sounded beautiful to me. It was
Thank
beautiful.
you. And I got them all painted up in like 2 weeks, and I finished my flute. So I had quite a few options to run for the 2 tournaments I was in.
Now you were telling us before you started recording, that you had considered the Iron Man, but you because you weren't here on Thursday, it was tricky. So what did you play in
Sure.
tournament wise?
Yeah, I love the idea of the Iron Man. I think it's a really, really cool idea. But having to do 2 tournaments in one day seemed a little daunting, and I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to make it. But I played in the land tournament Friday and got stomped pretty hard. And then I played in the sea tournament Saturday and made a good showing of myself.
So I will say, and we're gonna circle back because I have a lot more questions for you as a player, because this is our chance to like get feedback from people that participated and have it kind of recorded on air, so we can have this like fun, like live conversation. So the planning for this was kind of nuts. I had expected to be way more involved leading up to it, and then the end of my school year happened, and that was an adventure. But I think that overall this went pretty well. We had good numbers for the ones that we ran, and I will mention right off the bat, because I don't want to sell them short, but the Ironman winner was once again David Wolf, who is repeating. This is the second time in a row he's pulled it off, and also he was excited because he won his first gold medal. Because in the last time he won on the strength of multiple second place finishes, and that earned him enough cumulative points that he pulled it off. But this time he did win the Oak and Iron tournament. And I know that Andy didn't play in the Oak and Iron because he just wasn't there on Thursday. But Tyler, tell us about how Oak and Iron went on your end.
Oak and Iron was crazy because it was another, and this happened. We knew that this would happen. Our initial signups looked kind of light going into Historicon, and I ended up with double, possibly more than double the number of players that we expected for Oak and Iron. I have not run nearly as many tournaments as you guys have. I like doing demos and events. So I watched everyone else as the weekend progressed. Like Tom has some crazy matrix thing that he runs to chart out who's playing against who, and he has matches kind of preset as you go. Glenn records everything. I just kind of grab everyone's sheets at the end, pile them from first to last, and pair them off. And as long as they haven't played each other and I can get them onto a table that they have not played on yet, we're good to go. But I was surprised that the rounds for Oak and Iron, they were short. We
Really?
we preset the terrain. We didn't do the choosing a mission. We gave everyone their mission. We gave everyone their terrain. They got to choose their deployment, and they got to choose the mission modifiers like fog and local guide and things, or local pilot. But we got right into setup. We played eating engagement or encounter, the just bash each other, get through their games to conclusion in the like 90-minute rounds that we were given. And Oak and Iron doesn't feel like a slow game, but Oak and Iron is a slow game.
I think the first round was slow because people were rusty with the rules. But
Mhm.
once that happened, I noticed that round 2, round 3, you were ahead of schedule for the most part. People finished under the time.
Yeah.
Also, like, Tyler commuted, I should point out. Like, instead of staying over, because poor Glenn was sidelined for the first 3 days of the tournament, or 2 days of the tournaments, and he was able to kind of come in for the end on Saturday. But that meant that Tyler and I were solo. I don't know really how to play Oak and Iron particularly well. I'm looking on working on that because I have my set. I have expansion sets. I've even painted them. But I didn't have an opportunity to really bone up on the rules. So they had me set up a demo table basically over in the vendor area. And I had my Spanish fort that I made out of foam bricks and all the hills that I made. And I originally set it up over by the where Tyler was set up in the tournament space, but they asked me to move it, and so I moved it. And then the consequence of that was Tyler was entirely on his own, which is not my intent. I had planned on trying to co-run it with you, but it seems it went well. Overall thing, anything you do differently in terms of prep work for that, if you had to run that specific tournament again?
Like you said, I was commuting in, so I got there with time to spare, but I also it was my first day at the event, so I had to get there, get registered, get my parking passes, find parking. I really this is probably my least favorite venue of all of the ones, all the Historicons I've been to, because the parking situation can get really out of hand.
I will interject and say if you're staying there, it's great.
Oh, it's amazing.
Because the hotel was great, the rooms were nice, it was really well air conditioned, and it was blisteringly hot outside. And the spaces for the different games, it's easy to get around, and I found it easy to navigate. So I overall like the space, but I completely get your criticism, Tyler, in terms of parking. If you're commuting every day, is brutal because you're driving into a city and you're parking in a facility, which stinks.
I'll also agree that this is the worst case for parking, but having been to, I think, every venue that HMGS has used in the last decade, this is by far and away the best of the venues.
Best food wise for sure that I've been to.
Also
Just
true.
like con wise in general.
Yeah, like the con food was pretty good. They jack up the price obviously, but it still wasn't that bad.
I went out to Southern Market for every meal. It was a block away.
I went to a ramen place and I went to like a steak place and there was breakfast options. So like because it's in the middle of downtown Lancaster and we went to this great brewery on Friday night, like there's so many places to eat within walking distance of the venue. There's even like multiple rooftop bars. Yeah, I'm bummed that neither of you guys got a chance to stay over because a lot of the fun I had was just shooting the shit with Mike and all the Firelock guys and so we had a great time after the fact. I think you guys got a little taste of that on Saturday because you guys hung around for the game that Tyler put together, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But
The Issei, not the Issei, the ramen place that you went to, was that Issei Noodle? It's in like a shopping center.
Yeah, it was really good.
That place is amazing. The first shop that they opened is up the road from me.
Oh, cool.
and I've been going there for years. That place is incredible. So I'm glad that you found that, because people were like, "What's good to eat around here?" And I'm like, "How much do you like food that's not like chicken wings?" There's also an amazing Himalayan place that we went to with Mike and kind of just everybody.
So I was describing it as Nepalese, but yeah, Norbu is what I think it was called. And yeah, that food was great. I walked in, it smelled delicious. I don't think anybody there got something that they didn't like, and we all got different dishes.
You guys are making me hungry, and I already ate. So, I'll close off Tyler's ship tournament by saying the Oak and Iron thing. So, any advice for players that are playing in an Oak and Iron tournament, or like commonly made mistakes? I would say, based on your either the games you played as a ringer or what you observed as a TO, like advice for newer players.
I only played one game as a ringer. Um, from looking at everybody, it was actually hilarious to me. You could look down all of the tables, and everybody was in like a snarling dog fight. Like it was just a fur ball in the middle of the table of ships tangled up. And then there was always Joe. I felt like it should have just been somebody with like a dulcimer playing very calm, jaunty 17th century music, like the do 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 do, because he was in perfect line with his opponent, sailing, full Admiral Nelson style, trading broadsides in a gentlemanly way. And everyone else is just having a mosh pit in the middle of the table. So ship handling is something that I think anyone coming from Blood and Plunder, where we usually only have one boat or like, 4 canoes, if you're certain players, ship handling is something that people need to be patient with Oak and Iron. We had one player drop over the fact that he ended up bow first into an island with no real recourse to avoid it.
Wow.
That's rough.
Which brings us to Friday, which for us was the
This is kind of a planning point for us, but I know several of us have very nice 3-dimensional terrain for Oak and Iron, and if we're going to be presetting the terrain in the future,
Oh yeah.
I think we need to get all that stuff painted up and on the board, because that would, like, these games already looked great even with the 2D terrain that it comes with in the box. But if we can get out 3-dimensional terrain, I think that's just going to make everything like amazing.
Yeah.
I'm down for that. Yeah, I still have the boxes that I bought off you guys that I haven't busted them out. So I got to get that out. I got to get on that.
So I've got 2. I think you've got 2. He who shall not be named, friend of the show, has at least 2.
You mean Preston?
That's 1.
That's 1.
It's okay. As long as you don't say his name 3 times, he won't appear in the podcasting channel. So that brings us to Friday, which was our busiest day. We had Blood and Valor in the morning, which Rufus ran, and smaller crew for that, but we still had some people who fought it out that morning. Then in the afternoon, with very little break in between, which I think is something I don't want to repeat, but whatever. I ran Blood and Plunder, and I knew Glenn wasn't there, but we had all of Glenn's terrain, so Glenn was there in spirit. And Tyler got to play, and so did Andy. So at this point, I'll save my comments on my TO experience for the end, but I'll turn it over to Andy and just kind of ask us to. I'll go back and forth between the two of you. So, like, walk me through what you remember of your first game, and then I'll go to Tyler and he'll talk about what his first game was like. So, Andy, what was your first game like in the tournament? Overall impressions.
So even before the tournament, I did a quick demo with you, Tom, to get a rules refresher. I had not played another living person since last Historicon in November.
Was my crash course for you helpful at all, or was it a complete waste?
No, it was. It was nice to, because when you're playing like solo games, you're learning the rules, but you're also learning like your bastardized version of the rules. So getting a refresher on like, okay, I've been doing reloads right, I've been doing fatigue right, all right. And you helped me realize I was doing Brace of Pistols wrong. So that was very handy.
Did you hear that, Glenn and Tyler? I helped somebody learn a rule.
Good job. Where'd he finish? No.
After that, Joseph Forrester ran me through a game with my list that I was going to be playing in the tournament, just to get a good feel of it. So I had 2 quick games before the tournament began. My first game in the tournament was against Jaden.
Jaden King.
Jaden King.
Yeah, Jaden King.
That's a rough matchup.
And it was pretty brutal. I had never versed cavalry before, and he was running a Scottish cavalry list. And my instincts were right in avoiding the cavalry as much as possible and doing everything I could to delay their arrival. But when they showed up, we had a pretty solid melee in the center of the board with he had a unit and a half there, and I had 1 full unit and 2 half units, and his cavalry just swept me away. And once he mucked those guys up, my command unit was engaged towards the back of the board with 2 of his units, and the cavalry just finished me off. So Jaden was a great guy and really friendly, and also really encouraging with helping me with some rules that I was getting wrong and hurting myself with. Hey, if you do this, you'll get to roll more dice or this or that. So that was really handy, and yeah, still had fun. Got destroyed though.
He is a very aggressive general. I will say that. I've seen him
He
play.
knows how to play his list, and he loves Scots, and he plays them really well. Yeah.
But he knows that army's only hope is to close, and he's not shy about it.
And Tyler, talk to us about your first round game.
So this was my first land tournament that I've ever played in. Usually when we run these things, I'm off running demos or officiating them in some way. So other than the kerfuffle of players showing up and trying to help you get everything set up, I hit the table, got my list out, and was still in hyper go get 'em mode from making sure people, it's like showing up late. Do you have a list? Do you have models? Go get on the table. This is where you're playing. And so when I hit my opponent, it was kind of the same thing. And my first game was a bit of a walkover. I don't think that they were prepared for me to be making 8-inch charges. I had a motivated commander and a huge unit of sea dogs with blunderbusses and pistols, and they were just loaded for bear. And that unit kind of cleared about half their force, bottled them into the corner of the board, and I just sat there until they inevitably failed a strike test.
Who was it against? Do you remember?
It was against one of the Faltoon brothers, or I'm not entirely sure if they are brothers. Are they?
I think you were against Chris in the first round, but I could be wrong.
No, it wasn't Chris.
And Glenn at this point was texting us repeatedly saying, "How are the matchups going? Do you have enough terrain?" I'm assuming planning to somehow send it to us via Postmates or Grubhub, but we were good, and so we were set up. We used their tournament sheets, and I decided to kind of score keep however I felt like it, which was confusing to some people because that's not the way that tournament packet said. It was, yeah, more on that later. Andy, game 2. How'd game 2 go? Who'd you play and how'd it go?
Game 2 went really well. I played against another one of the North Carolina boys. I think it was Damien.
Yep, Damien.
And he was running a native list, and this table had slightly less line of sight blocking terrain than I would have wanted against a native list because he used hidden to great effect. And round 3, he strike tested me out pretty quick. So I got stomped again. But yeah, still a good game, and both Damien and Jaden spent the rest of the convention like checking in on me and like asking how my games were going and like giving me little pep talks like I was on Friday Night Lights. And It was really nice. It was nice to like make some friends, and they like were really cheering for me the rest of the tournament, which was sweet.
Where he was this time, but I know in the Eastern tournament, Damien, I think, was on top table at the end of the tournament. So I know he's a pretty good player.
Yeah, he's a very good player. Yeah, Damien and Jaden are both. So you got so. I did not do Swiss pairings in round 2. I will say what I did was I preset matchups based principally on making sure people that had been paired together or that drove together didn't get paired up. So, for example, I didn't want Tyler to be playing Preston. Shoot, that's twice. So like I made a matrix to ensure that didn't happen and put X's next to people I didn't want to pair, which is it was probably more effort than needed to be spent, but it was the only way my head could figure out how to preclude people from being paired up that didn't want to be. And then for the third round, I took a bit of extra time and fully Swiss paired and made sure top table to top table, et cetera, in the third and final round. So Tyler, second rounds, how'd it go for you?
Wait, I want to ask because we haven't addressed this. Andy, what was your list? Because we
Oh,
talked.
yes,
That's a
yes,
good
yes.
question, yeah. So you guys probably just know what I'm running if you're seeing my updates for the Summer of Plunder, because I only play French Buccaneers on sea and I only play French Caribbean Militia on land. So I was on Friday I was running French Caribbean Militia. I had 2 units of 6 Militia des Caribes, and then I had 2 units of 6 flibustiers, and in my command unit I had a standard bearer.
Okay. And Tyler, you mentioned your Sea Dogs full of blunderbusses, but overall, what was your list?
I ran the North American English militia out of Fire on the Frontier. So I had the motivated commander, Peter Schuyler. And then I had 2 units of 7 English militia, no bells or whistles on either of them. A unit of 8 braves, and I swapped out their muskets for bows and gave them throwing weapons. And then I had a unit of sea dogs, and I did the trick. I'm sure people, if you're on the Discord or anywhere, really have seen this. You can use a fighting man to push a unit up above the normal unit cap. So I went to 9 sea dogs, which let me get 3 blunderbusses, left them with their pistols, and that 9th man was a reformato, so they could charge and fight on a command point if they wanted to.
And how did your second game go?
The second game, I played against one of the North Carolina guys that came up. It was Joey. He had a Carib list, the Caribbean tribes. So that was interesting because the table that we got had a lot of site terrain on it, but it wasn't quite 50-50. So that was the only time, I think, in the entire tournament that I really cared about rolling for who got attacker and defender so that we could pick the side that we wanted. And we played, is it Take and Hold that has the single central objective?
Yes.
So we played that scenario, and everyone else had a rugby scrum kind of on the objective. And again, I used the sailors because I knew with natives you have to be super aggressive, like channel your inner J and just charge them. So everyone else has a rugby scrum on the objective. I was probably, if you put me at the south side of the table, I was probably 8 inches like northeast of the objective. I didn't bother claiming the objective until the very end of the game. And we just kind of beat the daylights out of each other. It was a lot of back and forth charging. Throwing weapons are gross. He had throwing weapons, and poisoned arrows are not fun. They make you reroll your resolve. But it was a good game. It was tight. It was hard fought.
Which brings us to your third and final game. And Andy, how was your final game? Who'd you get paired with?
My final game went really well. I do not remember this person's name, and I feel bad about it, but I also didn't speak to him much after this game where, like I mentioned before, Jaden and Damien both, like, kept in touch with me over the course of the rest of the weekend. But I learned things that I learned, or I used things that I learned from my first 2 games to great effect. Jaden taught me quite a bit about like entering and exiting buildings and fighting from buildings, and I used that. And Damien did this trick on me where he charged me from a blind corner, which sucked. And I just kept doing that to this poor guy I was against. And then I would use the French Caribbean militia to back up after I wiped one of his units. So I just kept popping up from behind this blind corner, wiping a unit, and then going back behind it so I couldn't be shot. And yeah, I won. It was nice to get a win under my belt after losing all day, and it was a well fought match. So it was a great game.
Well, you did better than me in my first tournament, which we famously mentioned earlier in this podcast. I played with nearly 300 points in a 100-point tournament and still managed to lose all 3 games. So I'm proud of you for learning so quickly, Andy. Which brings us to Tyler. Tyler, how was your third and final game?
I was undefeated going into it. I wasn't when I came out of it. So going in, I got matched against Dave Wolf, and he was not at all thankful for me setting him up to get that shiny gold medal in Oak and Iron. We ended up on a table that didn't have a whole lot of cover on it, which I can't complain about because you very specifically told me to walk around and make sure all the tables were good. And I know I walked past that one and I'm like, oh, it's a little sparse, but I'm sure it'll be fine. And then my luck, I got stuck playing on it.
Exactly. It's your fault, not mine. Not mine
he
at all.
got 2 units into a house. I couldn't get him out of there. He had some really strong shooting early on. And the one thing that I did not have on my sailors that I really wish that I had was smoke pots so that I could. I'm like, I guarantee I'm going to get stuck in the open and I'm going to need some kind of cover with me. And didn't run the smoke pots. I cut them for points. And I wish that I had them when I was playing against Dave. So he trounced me pretty hard, but I couldn't lose to a nicer guy. Except, maybe some of the Carolina guys. But Dave is definitely one of the best. I remember at the end of round 3 when you asked everyone to fill in favorite opponent on our sheet, I was like, I played Dave. Like that's where it's got to go, right? Because he's just the whole time he's like, I'm really sorry to do this to you. And I'm like, no, play the game.
No, he's always great. Dave's the best. So I guess parting thoughts on your LAN tournament, since this was the biggest tournament we had. I think we had 16 in the end, and we with like 3 walk-ups, I believe. And you were able to furnish one of those lists. I think I furnished one of the lists in terms of my models and stuff like that. I think Joseph got one of my lists that you had put together, but we used my models for. And Andy, you won yourself a prize at the end too, right?
Yeah, I was voted best opponent.
And I will point out, as I went through all these sheets, you are the only person who received all 3 votes. So
that's very flattering.
A lot of people got 1 or 2, but you got all 3. So
that is
guys
notable.
liked you. Yeah, that's quite notable. So you should be proud of that.
Normally, best opponent comes down to like a 3 or 4-way tie that I then have to like
find a way to break. Yeah. And Tyler finished just out of the running. I believe you were 4th. Yeah, you did pretty well.
Either 4th or 5th for the land.
Final takeaways from the land tournament. I'd say, like, Andy, having gotten to play games against people and not yourself for the first time in a long time, what was the biggest mistake you made in terms of either list construction or rules that you got wrong? And what's the thing you were happiest about?
So I think my list was well thought out and well constructed. I think my biggest mistake was not keeping my commander centralized for the first 2 games. And
okay.
I don't know if there's anything I could have done better against that cavalry list. Like, I think that was just designed to stomp on a French ranged list. I think I could have played a little stronger against Damien's native list and could have made a better showing for myself, but I was so worried about losing my commander after like getting trounced the first game that I kept him too far back. So I think that those in general were my two big mistakes, was not utilizing my command points and like having that commander centrally located to support everyone was a big error on my part.
Okay. And best moment.
Best moment was taking things I had learned from my opponents in the first two games and using them to win my third. That felt really, really good to, learn from defeat.
Okay, very cool. Tyler, same questions. Biggest regret and biggest thing you're happy about?
Biggest regret is almost a behind the scenes thing because I had to fill out the tournament reporting sheet for the first time. I was very confused. And I wrote that sheet. That's why Glenn's laughing. So I got to fix that for next time. Also, it would have been cool if I had gotten the tournament packets out because Joe was harassing me the entire time that we were at Historicon. Like the tournaments were over, we were playing other games, and he's like, "Yeah, it would have been great if I'd gotten a packet for that."
It would have been nice, Joe. I think he even offered to do it for us, and we're like, nah. So I don't blame him for being somebody who wants to bust our chops about it. I will say that one of the weird things that I did was I wanted to count, for tie-breaking purposes, strike points dealt as opposed to strike points taken. And traditionally, the way that this sheet is set up, it's meant to be like, oh, how many strike points did you have at the end? And so I went around and we did fine in terms of collecting information, but it yielded some interesting results. It wound up being that the winner of the Land Blood and Plunder tournament was Joe Forrester, who showed us why he knows the rules so well and why he's somebody who's answering almost as frequently as Tyler when new players ask a question, over on Blood and Pigmen and on Discord and on Facebook. So Joe Forrester finished first. Dave Wolf finished second. And those two were the only undefeated people in the tournament. They won 3 games. Third place was Jaden King, who finished on the strength of just how many strike points he dished out. So I believe he lost his second game, but he dealt out 11 strike points, which is nuts. And Andy has Andy saw just firsthand how that was happening, with those cavalry mowing people down. So you're not the only person to be trampled under hoof, Andy.
It felt a little bit like sitting across the table from a much nicer Grand Admiral Thrawn. Like, he was so strategic in how he was like deploying his force. It was like watching art.
That's high
as he
praise,
destroyed
Jaden.
me. Yeah.
High praise if he's listening.
Going in on the difference in the scoring there, because the way I use it with the packets, it's usually based on force preservation, where like if you can win and not have taken so many strike points. So Jaden usually does come in a little lower just because the Scottish list that he tends to run is it does shed a few more models on the way in. So he tends to give up one more strike point maybe than other people do. And that once you go into the 2 wins, 1 loss group, which typically makes up third place, that'll usually put him down near 5th or 6th.
Well, I didn't intend to purposely modify the scoring to make sure that Jaden wins. It's just, I'm like, I'm going to try this and see how it goes. And it just happened to favor him in this particular case. So,
right. I'm just talking about the nuances of like how scoring works, like for people who are interested in that kind of thing.
And to build on that, the reason that we decided to do it off of force preservation, I really like the idea of scoring it off strikes inflicted. The issue is it's possible to throw 2 strikes on somebody, have no strikes against yourself, and they bottle out on a strike test roll with their commander. And it's like, well, I could have gotten a bunch more points had the game continued on. So I didn't want to punish people for winning decisively on turn 3. And we also didn't want people to start gaming it where they're like, I'm just going to push this unit of militia out here and let you finish them off so that I can then brutalize you for another 2 strike points and just rope it up their opponent, because that's not when you know you're in that situation, and I've had that happen in some Games Workshop events and in Magic, when you know that you're just kind of being threaded along, it's not fun.
I completely get that as a point. And I think that we'll stick with force preservation moving forward. But thankfully, none of the people nobody was playing that kind of game. Not that I saw anyway. This isn't that kind of community. I don't think. Maybe when you get to a certain size, you're going to get that kind of gamesmanship. But I didn't see any of it, thankfully. Not yet, anyway.
There's also a realistic and historical element to this in that commanders, everybody knows, commanders who tend to get a lot of their guys killed are not very popular. And in the age of piracy, when you're all about attracting crew to your ship because you're a good commander, they're not going to go to the guy's ship if they know that he loses his crew or half his crew every time. They're going to go to the guy who can go in and win, not losing guys. So that's another historical aspect to take a look at it with that.
I'll say final takeaways from the tournament were, so I sat down in between rounds. I had a demo table set up, but I was managing a lot and it was larger than some of the other ones. So I was floating a bit, answering rules questions. But I thought I was happy with how it went. I would have edited, the tournament pack. I would have had that out and edited specifically for this. I would have had lists on trays ready to go with models out, so that if walk-ups walked up, I could just hand them a tray and be like, "You're over there." I would have edited the score sheet slightly, and I think I would have changed around some of the terrain on a few of the tables. So I took a lot of notes, and I kind of know moving forward how I would run it if I were to do it again, for that particular land tournament type of thing. But I think timing, it worked well. I also kept a record, before Mitch burned it and threw it in the trash, of how many how many games timed out, because I was curious about stats for that. So in round one, 7 games were basically timed out, so it was a little more than half. But
It's 16 players. That's 8 games.
So no, then I'm thinking 7 play. Some of them were just slow to give me the sheets, so I think it was maybe 4. So half the games timed out, or they were still going at the call. The second round, it was down to 2, and then the final round, it was 2, and it was generally some of the same players. So I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just saying that some people move at a slower pace than others, but the games are still largely finished. They were through the 5th turn, and they were able to kind of mark out, a winner and a loser pretty clearly. So I'm happy with how it went. I would do it again, but I'd make some modifications, I think. Which brings us to our final tournament, which happened on Saturday at high noon. And so Tyler and I weren't sure if Glenn would emerge from a fog, like somebody at a Kiss concert, to run it, but Glenn did, and so Tyler and I and Andy were all able to play, and so I'll let Glenn talk about kind of the overall his experience, because it's mostly confined. It's confined to Saturday, aside from what he was able to text us, and tell general impressions of the tournament, and then we'll pop over to each person to give kind of a general rundown of how things went for them. And so Glenn, tell us like overall impressions of it, lessons learned, things like that.
Killing me to promise so much stuff and then at the last minute not be able to make it and just have to get sidelined for 2 days. So the first chance I got, I took off and made it up there. I got there at 8 a.m. not realizing that nothing opens till 9. I came in, did my stuff, went to get the tournament running. Much like the previous 2 tournaments, we had a certain number of people signed up online, and unfortunately, like half the people that played just walked in expecting to join. So it does help us a lot if people sign up ahead of time.
Yeah.
Just because we have an easier time doing numbers. We had to deploy an extra table at the last minute that we hadn't accounted for, that kind of stuff, which
I cannot imagine just walking up to a tournament and expecting to get to play. That's wild, people. Send your list in ahead of time. What are you doing?
As a
I mean,
teacher, it drives me nuts. Go ahead, Tyler.
I was to say, we had someone rock up to the land tournament. Tom was with me. Tom looks over and he's like, "We're not taking any more walk-ups." And someone walked up and they're like, "I'd like to play in this." I'm like, "Do you have models?" And I thought Tom
They also
was going to scrape
pause.
out my skull with a melon baller. Like,
Pause. Okay, pause. Because I was in the middle of setting up another table for this person and trying to get pairings ready and pulling my BS out of a bag for this list for a different player. And then this guy walks up 10 minutes after the start of the tournament. Sure. Okay. Like we'll try to find a way to accommodate everybody, but it was crazy. So I think a lesson that I took from this is we will have our table set. We will have a number of them set up in case of a certain number of walk-ins. But once the thing gets going, and once we've filled those spots, it's closed because it requires too much additional planning, and it delays the start for the players that signed up and took the time to prepare themselves. So this isn't like, I'm happy for everybody who played. I'm glad you came, but if you're a walk-in, my request of you would be, please sign up next time if you're sure you're going to play. And second, if it's past the start time for an event, it's
SOL.
iffy. It's iffy whether or not we're going to be able to accommodate you, and you can't you really don't have a right to be offended if we can't. So because it took a lot of planning and bringing stuff and setting up tables, and so anyway, we're glad we had, but it could be frustrating for an organizer who is thrown to the wolves to make sure that everybody had a chance to play. So that's my rant.
even if you're not sure that you can make it, just send us an email real quick and be like,
Yeah,
"Hey guys,
just tell
not
us
sure
you
I can
can't.
make
It's
it,
fine. That's cool.
but I'm interested." Just so we have like a name on a paper so that I know to print out enough of the score sheets or something like that.
Yeah, worst case scenario, we set up a table and you don't show.
Yeah, it's way easier for
Especially for a C tournament. So
Yeah.
Glenn, tell us of your experience for the C tournament.
So I got harangued by Mitch a bit because we started a half an hour late because a lot of people showed up last minute. I was still trying to get all the score sheets issued, collected, figured out who was even playing, that kind of thing. I also am probably too nice and accommodating in trying to make sure that some people are showing up and playing literally for their first time. So I tried to make sure that they weren't set up against the hyper aggressive players that I know are out there.
Tyler.
What?
Tyler's
We're
a
like
quartermaster.
first game. It's gonna seem real bad now.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
didn't you stomp that guy?
Tyler beat him and Tom stomped him.
Oof.
Yeah,
we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
there.
So yeah, and I know he's a listener too. So I apologize now for having put you against Tom, but I realized who all you got to play, and I think
Gunnar was my vote for favorite opponent because he was awesome, and he was a really good sport about it considering how it went down. But anyway, please continue.
So I got everything sorted out. Things got started. The aggressive lists that I knew were out there. I didn't intentionally pair the hard players against each other, but our unnameable friend of the show got paired against Joe Forster, which apparently I didn't realize that the two of them had played each other in the last round of the land game, but they got paired off at the start of the sea game. And one thing that I didn't do intentionally, but ended up happening, was in the first round, it was ships against ships and canoe lists against canoe lists. So that ended up being amusing, at least to me.
It was amusing to me as well.
It helps striate the player base a little bit too. And for me, I take in the scores. I have a spreadsheet. Tom's seen it. Actually, Tom created the spreadsheet, and I just fill it out now. But I go through and I make sure that I've got all the numbers. I try to do things straight Swiss style, so that everything's on the up and up, and the people are ranked the way they need to be ranked. So if you're playing somebody, it is probably the person immediately above or below you. I do also try to do the thing where, you don't end up dancing with the person you came with, essentially, because like there are a lot of buddy groups that come together. And what always annoyed me when I was playing Flames is like after round 1, I'd end up playing 2 of my friends that I came to the tournament with when there's 30 players in the tournament. Like, I want to play other people because iron sharpens iron, and I'm not going to get better playing my same group. I'm going to get better playing new opponents.
Let me interject for a second about a couple things. So I forgot that I made that spreadsheet. I didn't even realize it was mine. Second, Glenn, MVP that he is, actually edited stuff from home and sent them to me so I had running lists of people. So while he was home taking care of his adorable children and his sick wife, he did actually do like database stuff and sent me things. I didn't have a computer with me, which is why Tyler saw me creating, the scribblings of a madman all over my economics notes, because my wife stole my laptop because she stayed up on this family vacation in Lake George, and nothing says family vacation like spending a portion of your day doing at-home therapy from an isolated cabin, which is what she was doing with my computer. So that took precedence over recording tournament results. So I'm glad Glenn was able to get access to the spreadsheet. I did get to use it, and yeah, I'm psyched with how the pairings went for the first round, and we did a pretty good job of. I don't think we ever paired Jaden and Damien together, or I tried not to pair Preston and Todd together, but there weren't a lot of people that had come together that were at risk of getting paired. I don't think.
All right. Well, anyways, so yeah, I paired people the best I could. I tried, like I said, I tried to be accommodating in my pairings. I tried to put newer players with experienced players that I knew wouldn't just curb stomp them because they're newer players, because I know that's also a bad experience that I had seen play out in other tournament systems before, where TOs know who the aggressive good players are and they'll just throw them the fresh meat essentially, so that you get the good matchups in round 3 or 4. I like to avoid that because those are going to rise to the top anyway. And if you have 2 good players play each other early on, they're still going to get great games in.
How many players did we wind up with overall?
We had 14. Oh, that's a good
14.
to talk about. To my knowledge, I can think of a 6-player tournament that we had for C games. There may have been an 8 that I'm not aware of, but 14 is by and far the largest C game tournament that I know of happening for Firelock.
14 is,
So-
I think, the biggest HMGS tournament that we've done for Blood and Plunder prior to lockdown, like when everything got canceled. Because Fall In,
Yeah, I
when we
agree.
came out and we did Historicon in November or whenever it was, like those events were enormous.
When you ran the Perico game,
Yeah. Anything from that time and before, those tournaments were like a dozen people for land. So
yeah,
we were worried
That's
about
not right.
turnout, and I don't think that we really needed to be.
and this is with, again, it was 14 with like my entire group of buddies ended up ditching it last minute for various and very legitimate reasons.
So it should have been bigger,
We had
Eric,
Max.
Max.
You want to go to the third one? Do I need to say it?
No, don't say it.
Ben.
Ben.
How dare you have a deer jump out in front of your car? He's fine.
You just drive faster. It's like when you hit a moose in Maine. It just goes over the top of the car.
What?
That's how it works.
Watch
That's like it's a legit tactic. That's
yeah, but
like,
it doesn't work. Watch Mythbusters.
no, it doesn't. You will die. Please don't do that. If you're listening to this, don't like drive faster when you see a 1,200-pound moose in the middle of the road on I-95. It's not going to end well for you or the car or the moose. The moose will likely walk away. Like it has several times happened.
But you're gonna take out his knees for the season, so
Yeah, it's just terrible. It's a terrible choice.
Pirate
All right.
podcast told me to floor it.
The Pirate Podcast told me to mow down that moose, baby. So my suggestion is that we go through kind of the rundown of our games, and we'll start with Tyler because Andy and me are tangled up. So Tyler, tell us of your 3 games. Just give us the quick rundown.
So I ran essentially the exact same list that I ran the day before. I swapped out my Braves for provincial troops and gave my sailors an extra sailor, cut some stuff. We went from 150 to 200 points. So my extra 50 points was basically a sloop with a trio of medium guns on it. And 3 medium guns and then having a motivated commander, which keeps them loaded every turn, is kind of how my tournament went. I played against Gunner in round 1. He was one of the players that Glenn thought he was new, like had really not played any games. I got to the table. I asked him, because I was ready to go into like the full demo spiel like I did for Glenn when I played him in the Sea tournament and press ganged him into this game. So I was getting ready to like go over activation cards and command points, and I'm like, this is a really terrible list to explain the game to somebody against, but okay. And he's like, oh no, I read Blood and Pigment, I watch the podcast, or I listen to the podcast, I watched all of the tabletop stuff. I just haven't gotten a chance to get it on the table. So
Yeah, in my defense, I did just ask, is this anybody's first time playing? And he put his hand up, which is usually an indicator that you haven't.
And he had French Buccaneers and a Tartana. And aside from, he steered into a rake at one point, and it was one of those like, moved the ship, we went to the next card. I would have let him take it back, but we were already into the next card, and he's like, oh, I know what's about to happen. 10 points of damage later and 5 critical rolls. Everything is on fire. The ship has sprung a leak. He's down 2 guns. And then he boarded me with this flaming wreck of a ship, which set my ship on fire, and it turned into a boarding action, kind of both of us fighting back and forth over the rails of the ship and trying to clear the decks, because that first mission was to capture the enemy flagship. So I ended up dealing 7 strike points in that game, which I think might be the most you can score in a sea game against somebody, because you don't count strike points in it. The game just goes until you capture the ship or 6 turns burn out. So we only looked at strike points when it's trying to figure out what to put on the card. And I only had, I want to say, 2 strikes against me in that first round. Yeah, that fight was bloody. It was a lot of fun. We were laughing the entire time because it was like, ha, I've completely disabled your ship. And then he just crashed it into me. I'm like, all right then.
Nice.
Yeah. My second game I played against, I think everyone calls him Miami Joe.
That's what he's known as in our club, because we have a bunch of Joes that attend on the Monday night crew, so everybody's got their own nickname. And it's Joseph Dieguez. He used to work for Firelock. He knows Mike. They've hung out back when he lived in Miami with the crew. Then he moved up to the Baltimore region. So amongst
I think Mitch was trying to recruit him for like JSOC wargaming stuff because he was with the Air Force. He's a cool guy. He's a really nice guy.
He's very laid back.
But I played against him. We did engagement. It's just the 2 ships sailing at each other with the wind abeam. Standard strike points just inflict pain on the other guy. And my ship, he turned, wanted to sail like Joe and exchange broadsides and toasts and such. So he steered so that he would be sailing large, and I just kind of cut upwind of him, reduced sail, and became a turret, because I knew that for him to get to board me, he would have to bring his ship around and into the wind. And I proceeded to just every turn pound into his ship with medium guns until that strategy doesn't get you a lot of strike points, because I really didn't kill much, but I inflicted 3 against. I think I had none on myself. It was a catastrophic hit, reduced his ship to no fortitude remaining, and did like 25% casualties on his force. So if he had been able to board me, it probably would have gone the other way. And Glenn called an audible for round 3, so we did the same mission again. I got paired against Adam, who's one of my locals, but my options were really kind of to get paired against people that I play somewhat regularly. I played against Adam, tried to do the same thing, get upwind of him. He immediately shot down my gun crew because he took the all swivels and small arms, no cannons at all list. Immediately shot down my gun crew, reduced me to only being able to load and fire 1 cannon, at which point I raked him through the stern, dismasted his ship, or knocked down one of his masts. He spent 2 turns drifting, came out of the drift with a wind lull. Every crit I threw on his boat hit the rigging, so it was taking away speed, making it harder for him to turn, all of these things. I shot away the rudder. And meanwhile, he was just pouring small arms into my ship. So we ended like 3 strike points to 2 with the victory on him. I had practically nobody left on my ship, and he had no ship. So our lists did exactly what they were meant to do, but it just kind of reinforces the notion that small arms is still the way to go. I had a list that was definitely built for artillery and couldn't pull it off. That might change with Raise the Black because of some of the things that are coming with those rules.
I'm glad to hear that the tactic I've always proposed of just taking a medium cannon sloop and sailing upwind of your opponent and staying there.
It did, but to do it, I was using veteran sea dogs with expert artillery crew, and then I had a captain who could give them, with 1 command point, he could give them 2 actions. So I was reloading the guns every single turn without having to push. If I wanted to, I could push and double fire my guns on 1 turn. Then I would spend the whole next turn reloading. It's a lot to be able to do that, and you still get shot to pieces by small arms if someone really wants to just wreck your face with swivel guns.
Yeah, that's where again the new cannon rules and Raise the Black are really gonna fix this.
Yeah,
it'll make it easier to do damage at the range you need to stay at. We'll say that way.
But yeah, I enjoyed the sea game. I finished like top 5 somewhere. I got like just knocked out of being a podium spot, which is fine because as far as I'm concerned, the 3 of us ran these things. It would be real awkward for one of us to win it. Or
Yeah, I'm not taking any
take a prize.
support.
Yeah.
Again, it drives me bonkers for other game systems when somebody runs a tournament of like 24 players and then
That's a pet peeve of mine as well. Like, yeah,
They-
I'll play in it, but yeah.
like they don't take a prize, but they win. The fact that they win their own tournament, it just looks super wonky.
Which brings us to Andy and me, and I'll preface this by saying, so Andy and I got to play in the first round. I was paired with Andy ostensibly because I knew something, which is hilarious because Andy knew more about the ship rules than me, frankly. I will say that I disappointed Andy, and I'm sorry, because I did not pilot my flute because I was so frazzled getting stuff ready and packed in the car that I didn't really make a list and didn't have an opportunity to. I barely reread the rules. So I stole one of Glenn's pre-made lists, a very well constructed list, which I will discuss momentarily. And I got to play Andy in the first round, and his ship is gorgeous. I think you said that your husband did the sails, which turned out amazing. And I even loved your crab flag. It was adorable.
Thank you.
And so talk about how adorably I was murdered. Go ahead and give your impressions of how the first game went, and then just take us through the rest of your tourney.
So I designed my flute to take it on the chin from cannon fire and then slowly but surely move towards the opponent, peppering them with swivels and muskets. And so I was French Buccaneers with 2 units of Marines downgraded to just the melee weapons, no pistols, and they were on 4 swivels on the front deck. Then my mid deck was my command unit, which was 6 flibustiers, my commander, and a standard bearer, and then another 6 flibustiers, and then on the back deck another
Was
6
this
flibustiers.
the standard bearer?
This is the standard bearer, yeah. So I won the standard bearer from Tyler during the Summer of Plunder, and I got to use him to great effect during the sea tournament because it was great being able to manage the fatigue coming my way from getting shot full of cannons and just rolling with the damage as I moved towards my opponents. So this first game, Tom, you got off a great set of raking fire on me, and we're doing your best to stay clear, but I think I got you pinned in and then was able to board you. and once I boarded you, it was kind of all downhill from there.
I only got off one volley, if I recall. I got one cannon volley off, and then I couldn't reload.
Yeah, you made it count though, because I mean it was an excellent raking shot volley. And I unloaded swivels on you pretty close, and then I couldn't. I didn't do a great job of managing fatigue, even with the standard bearer on my Marins, because they were too scared to charge in. But once you unloaded on them and scared them off, I went in with my command unit, and flibustiers are pretty brutal in melee, so they mopped you up pretty quick once I had.
So I learned a lot from this. I stupidly didn't realize that if you've assigned crew to multiple guns, when they get a reload order, they reload all the guns at the same time. I had them as like, oh, each individual gun needs to be reloaded with an individual action, which is false. Additionally, I put guys up in the sheets, but I put the guys up in the sheets that had expert artillery on them, which is not the intention of the list. So the worst possible people were sitting there to kind of do the reloading. I played the list as badly as it could have been played, but I still got off some fun shots and did some damage before you closed in for the kill, I think.
Yeah, like I said, I mean the plan was to like board with the Marins because of hard chargers, and they would not leave my ship. They were terrified of you. So it wasn't my intention to charge in with my command unit, but sometimes you got to improvise a little bit. And
So game one was a win to you, big time. I think I had 6 strike points because you wiped out my entire crew, which is 4 strike points. Then you had a unit on the deck of the ship, which is a 5th strike point, and you captured the ship, which is a 6th strike point, if I'm remembering this correctly. So he had 6, or something else had happened to my ship that gave him that 6th point. So we had to correct the scorecards later, but yeah. So, and talk us through your second and third game.
second game was against I believe Adam, and he and I were running similar lists in that we were both there to run swivels and board. I believe he was using a brigantine, and I described this fight as Rocky versus Ivan Drago. Like we were just, our ships were attached in the center of the board, and we were just beating the crap out of each other. He'd board, then I'd board, then he'd board, then I'd board, and we were just repelling boarding parties back and forth. And he did win the day, which broke my heart, but it was extremely close. 3-1 strike points. And I believe that one went to time, if I'm remembering correctly. And then my final game was against someone named Spencer, and Spencer was also running a brigantine, and he was also running a boarding list. So we just rammed our boats straight into each other, and right before we made contact, I let out a pretty brutal swivel gun hit on him. All 4 swivels unloaded, mostly hits. And then he boarded me with his, I want to say Sea Dogs, and they just didn't get off the big punch that they needed. I rolled a lot of saves, and then from there, like he really needed that hit to be big, and it wasn't as strong as it needed to be. And from there, he was fighting a losing battle. I ended up boarding him with 2 units of flibustiers, and just,
If I remember correctly, he was running La Valente, or however you say it.
Yes, he was. I played him in the second round. So I played him and knew he was going to try to board me, but thought I could stay out of his way. And since I can't drive a boat, I just crashed into him, and I got off one volley, just like before. But this
no.
time, Andy, in round 2, his unit did exactly what it was supposed to do. So instead of charging with the Sea Dogs, what he did was he well, he charged on with a unit of like 9 filibustiers that all had their bracelet pistols, and they charged on the deck. Every single one of them hit. They wiped out like 11 stands. Then he gave them a command point to do it again, and then they did that again. And then by the time he was done, he had wiped out 2 full units and 18 stands and cleared the entire mid deck of the ship. Before I could do anything, I had blunderbusses, but I was holding them because I didn't realize I had them because I'm too stupid to read the list. So I was waiting to give them rerolls on the assault in pistol range. So I decided to, hold off on pulling the trigger on them. So they were able to die before that happened. And he threw the corpses over the side and charged gloriously up into the wheelhouse where he seized control of the ship. So I think we ended like maybe 30 minutes early, 45 minutes early, because that was the world's shortest boarding action in round 2.
That's wild. He and I finished my game 45 minutes early against him.
No, he was a gentleman, and you could tell he felt kind of bad about it. And I'm like, don't feel bad about it. Like,
he was great.
What the list is supposed to do. But like, it was amazing because I thought I had him, right, because as the game began, we're sailing towards each other with the wind abeam, and then his first card was an event card that started a light rain, and it also changed the wind direction to behind me. So I was sailing large while he was literally into the eye. And I don't think we did them right because he should have been drifting more than he was. But because he has La Volante or whatever special sails he has, he didn't suffer the same penalty that you'd expect a brigantine to have because he has all these extra sails. So he kept kind of like tacking towards me, getting closer. And I'm like, you're sailing into the wind. You're never going to get me. And then the light rain made sure I took 5 reload markers in the first cannon volley. And then I tried to like turn into him, and it went badly. Third game was against Gunner, and poor Gunner. So I was in the bottom of the barrel. It was like me, Gunner, Nigel, and who was playing against Nigel?
Drew Oval.
Yeah, yep. And Andrew, and it was a race for the bottom to see who would stave off the embarrassment of the wooden spoon. And I finally decided to read Glenn's list that he gave me, because Glenn's list is Dutch privateer list. It's a sloop. It has 3 cannons, 3 sets. It has militia to absorb hits. It has a huge squad of guys to reload the artillery with expert artillery on it. It has lead-in, and then it has a bunch of European sailors with muskets. So it's actually a pretty good list. And this time I hung back as the Sartana tried to get in close, and was able to just pound the bejesus out of him with, I think I hit him with 4 different volleys of cannons. I raked him at one point. His ship, just as it was about to board, was halted 6 inches short of me as it caught fire and sprung 3 leaks. And he was able to put out the fire, and he was able to patch one of the leaks, but not the other. So that meant that the ship was sinking, but it takes a full turn to sink. So he tried to take a couple of shots at me, let's see, Jack Sparrow style, as the ship sunk, into the harbor. But it just wasn't enough. And the ship did sink, thankfully not on fire.
It reminds me of one of those phrases that I often hear Tom say, which is, because Gunner, his ship was sinking and he's just trying everything he can. And it reminded me of that phrase, "From hell's heart I stab at thee."
Yeah, pretty much.
He's trying.
I admire his gumption, and he was my vote for best opponent. He was to take a drubbing that bad, and I know as somebody who's taken many of them, it can require a lot of grace to maintain your composure. And he had a smile on his face, and he was a nice guy throughout. So I really appreciated it.
We were catching up after the tournament because he was playing French, and my heart goes out to all of my countrymen. And yeah, it seemed like he learned quite a bit. He was already talking to me about ideas he was going to have to rework his list. And he seemed like he had a darn fine.
I want to point out that between being beaten up by Tyler and Tom, he got to go up against Joe Forrester, which means that he spent the middle round just getting filled with arrows.
Yeah.
As canoes boarded him. Joe's 4 canoes. This is
Joe's 4
monstrous.
canoes.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of French countrymen, I gotta ask Tyler, how many games did you play during the tournament?
The whole time I was there, I played 7 games. I played them all as English, but I played French for Oak and Iron.
Yeah.
The one game that I got to ring
Wh-
with, I played French and Oak and Iron.
Weird that you played so many for the English. You know, in the we're 1 point behind the Dutch. If we had
Yeah.
had those 6 games, my man.
I didn't
Yeah, that plan
record.
didn't work out.
I didn't record anything for the English. I won't turncoat. Yeah, I didn't record anything for the English.
Okay,
And
good man,
really,
good man.
the Summer of Plunder, when I initially signed up for it last year, I wanted to sign up as the English captain, and I think someone else grabbed it or wanted it more. I ended up as the French, but there's this, truth be told, there's this thing where everyone thinks that I play the French a lot, and I really don't. We were talking today in the group chat for it, and Joe was like, how many French players were there? And like, I wonder what's going on, that more people don't play French. I want to take some more time looking at the French from Fire on the Frontier. And I'm like, I really don't know what half the French do in Fire on the Frontier.
I haven't cracked open my rulebook for it yet, other than to do the scenario challenge. So I got to dig into Fire on the Frontier.
It is a lot of fun. You're going to enjoy it. The scenario play is great. You're going to have a blast. So the winner of the Sea tournament was Fernando Arteaga, who is always awesome. And he brought, what did he have with him? He had, oh my gosh.
2 Paragua lists. They were
he's not the only one that
his
had
list
that
was
list.
so cool.
Yeah.
Actually, that was probably the funniest game to me as the TO was in round 2. We've already said it, so whatever. He was up against Preston, who also brought the 2 Paragua Navy SEAL list. So 2 of the Paraguas met in like the exact middle of the table, and there was a giant cluster of the 2 of them fighting each other with boarding actions going back and forth, while the other ones were just circling like sharks, pumping as much swivel gun fire into each other as they could.
That sounds like an awesome cinematic moment. Yeah.
So
It was very entertaining to look up.
So Fernando had like a small boat list. Preston had a small boat list. Joe brought a small boat list because he brought that one with the stupid poisoned arrows that was driving everyone nuts.
Miguel.
Yeah.
Nigel, yeah.
So
Nigel.
4 of the players rocked up with these small boat lists. And I remember just every round being like, I don't want to play the small boats. I don't want to play the small boats. And I think Preston at one point was like, I don't want to play the small boats. I don't want to play the small boats.
They're a tough list, especially if you're relying on gunnery, because they have to get in close. Like, if you fire a cannon at close range and hit them, you'll probably sink them, but you have to hit them first.
That was the whole thing with Andrew Vogel had Nigel in round. Is that round 2 or that had to have been round 2, right?
It was round 3.
Round
it
3,
was the final round.
yeah.
It was the final round.
Nigel sailed up and boarded him, and I just hear from like a few tables down, I hear Andrew, can you shoot cannons when you're like board on board with someone in a boarding action? And it's like, I don't see why not. Like a few minutes later, I just hear Nigel like, really? Like I just start getting reports that Black Kettle's on the bottom of the ocean because
It reminds me of that scene from like from like Master and Commander where like they're getting boarded and just like a bunch of like that little kid with one arm runs up and just starts pulling the strings on cannons to like blast the the deck and spins around.
From my understanding of what happened, Niguel was doing his hyper aggressive Black Kettle thing because he had a Paragua and 1 Canoa. And then it was Black Kettle with a large unit and another unit of warriors in the Paragua. And then I think like a support shooty unit kind of in the Canoa, with the idea being that the Paragua comes up and does most of the damage with boarding. So he comes up and Andrew bumped him. Like Andrew got off a cannon shot early that like did a point of damage or something like that. It didn't do very much, but it knocked the Paragua down to like 3 hit points. And then somehow the boats came about in such a way that he bumped him, which did another point of damage to the Paragua. At that point, the Paragua comes alongside just due to the way movement worked, and Niguel grappled on and then did a boarding action, which I believe he kind of whiffed on, and then Andrew counterattacked and forced him off the boat. So combat was done. And then at that point, he was asking, like, if I'm grappled to somebody, can I shoot my cannon? So I just had this picture of, like, the guys in the back or in the front of the bark are, like, picking the light cannons up to, like, aim it into the bottom of the piragua.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Like-
he fired, hit with a couple dice, rolled a bunch of dice, and a piragua is just a boat. It doesn't have the complicated hit chart that a ship has. And he rolled the dice to just destroy it. Just destroyed, gone. Everybody on board sinks instantly.
It's like a parliamentary heel
That's
to get the
rough.
boat over enough to shoot down into the
That's
piragua.
nuts. That's nuts. I think at the like going into the weekend, I think we had like 4 people signed up for the Sea Games, and and Mitch was making fun of us, and he's like, "You're not going to get anybody because like you shouldn't have done the sea tournament and the land tournament." And I'm like, "Whatever. Like I want to play with this ship. Like I spent months painting these ships. I want to play the ship. I want to learn the ship rules." And we had 14 people, and I think I had a blast. I had a great time. And I'm psyched we did it. So I'm psyched we ran everything we did. So again, the tournament winner was Fernando Artiego. I should mention that Jeff Wiltrout won Blood and Valor, and the finale basically had David Wolf winning out. The only person who was close to him was Joe Forrester, but he didn't do well enough in the Sea tournament or in Oak and Iron, and he didn't play in Blood and Valor, so he just didn't have the points. But Dave Wolf came in and took it.
Yep.
So
and Miami Joe did get favorite opponent in the Sea tournament as well.
he did, yeah. So
Nice.
I think we have had a lot of private conversations about like how like structural things are going to change, or I don't know if we're doing an Ironman next time. It's possible we wind up doing like we're going to compress a bunch of these games into a single day, or really carefully consider what's going to run, what's not, because I don't know about you guys, but like I was there for longer than you. Andy, were you there all 3 days, all 4 days? You were only there Friday, Saturday. So
No, I was only there Friday and Saturday.
and because of all the business of doing this, I basically didn't do anything else at the con. I basically ran demos for 6 hours. I ran around like a chick with my head cut off, getting terrain set up and running tournaments and then playing. So this was my entire con, but I had a blast. But in future, we might compress this to a day so that there's other stuff to do at the con. We've also talked about doing a participation game more formally on the Pell. But that brings us to kind of one more thing, which I'm excited to hear about because I didn't get to stick around for it because I had to head home that night. But Tyler went crazy building terrain because we wanted to set Joe Forrester up in style by building a scenario around one of the things from the Fire on the Frontier book. So I'll let Tyler take the lead, talk about your prep for this game, and then I'll let you and Glenn kind of talk about what went on.
Talking about prep is pretty brief because there really wasn't much. Played the Great Swamp Fight, and that's one of the scenarios in Fire on the Frontier. It's a really cool scenario. I actually really enjoy it. It's a good use of Joe's fortification rules that finally got published after 12 years of him bothering Mike to get them. I built 7 feet of palisade wall, and then because it's a 2-foot diameter, or 2-foot radius fort that we put on the table on a 6x4 table. And then I built a lot of winter scattered terrain, and I felt kind of bad because I did it with pines and conifers and stuff. Apparently there was an awful lot of birch, I think, in the swamp from pictures and things that I've looked at. But anyway, I built a bunch of scatter. We used your mat because I ordered a mat, but my original plan had been to make this a hard board, 4x6 with foam glued down to wood with like battens around it to give it some structural rigidity. And I don't know what was going on with the foam that I used. I don't use the pink foam, the pink insulation foam. I have ways of dealing with the extruded polystyrene, which is the stuff that's like the little balls that everyone's significant other hates when we model with it. But I used Gorilla Glue, and I don't normally have a problem with it. And it completely destroyed the foam every time I tried to glue it down. And I thought I was having issues with the lumber that I bought. I was apparently not. It was really just the stupid glue. So last minute, I spent way too much time trying to figure out how I'm going to build this board with the wood and getting the foam on it, getting the foam stuck down. And then it's like 2 weeks before and I need to start actually building things. So I was commuting to the con in part to save money, but also because I was coming home every night and working on terrain until 3 in the morning or so, and then turning around and going back to the convention. I played that sea game on an hour of sleep. We finished the sea tournament. I went out to eat with the guys, came back. We set up the Great Swamp Fight, and I will just let that stand as like any mistakes that Glenn is going to throw me under the bus for making in strategy on this Great Swamp Fight. I was very tired.
Yeah, we started.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
The table looked great.
Yeah, it was like 10 o'clock at least till we started. And you said you got home at 4, right, Glenn?
Yeah, it ran till 1:15 in the morning, and then we packed up cars by like taking. I was parked on the hotel roof as well, so like we had to take all the stuff up 4 floors, and then I had an hour and a half drive home. So yeah, I collapsed into bed somewhere around 4 a.m.
Yeah, it was like
Don't worry,
for
though.
me.
No offense, but I'm glad I left at 7 o'clock because I got home at like 11:30, and I crashed and went right to bed because it had been, it's like Mitch will be like, "Oh, we're going to bed," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's like 10:30 or 11," and then he would just he would always have stuff to talk about, and he would just talk until like 2 in the morning and he'd pass out. So I only slept for like 4 hours a day. That's all I had.
Welcome
But
to my
I'm
schedule.
Yeah, I know. It's like having kids. It's like
But
having
don't
kids.
worry, despite getting home at 4 a.m., I didn't get too much sleep because the kids woke me up at 6 and then for good at 8 a.m.
Oh, because they love you.
And then I did farm work all day. It was great.
Nice. But
Yeah.
the game, I'm glad the game went off. I'm glad it happened. I'll get my mat back eventually, and
I've got it. It's safe.
yeah, it's fine. I'm glad I got you your flag.
Oh yeah,
And
that was great.
Yeah, a lot of debts were paid off on this one, weren't they?
that's for paid off.
I
I'm actually
got
in the process of
to tie.
I'm building your dock tomorrow. I have all the pieces assembled for it. I'm gonna start working on it, so I'll take pictures, send them to you while I'm doing it.
Back all the debts accrued during the painting challenges during 2020.
Yeah.
I know. It's getting there.
Back to the game, Tyler. I know you said it was on a 6x4, but we were using the 2 tables pushed together.
It ended up being
It
a
was
5x5.
5x5?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think that messed us up because of the way that we did deployment. Do you want to? I really wish we had Joe on for this part actually, because he got a lot of really great pictures. He's seen this scenario played. Deployment was I had Jay on my left flank with his guys. I took the center with Josiah Winslow. Overall command. And then Glenn had yours was like a mostly Dutch force on my right.
It was okay. So due to the flapjacking incident, I did not get to paint the 24 Indian fighters that I was slated to paint. I got 12 of them mostly done, and I was not about to take them off painting sticks and varnish a 3/4 finished model.
Right.
Just so I could use them. So yes, most of the models in my force were Dutch approximations of their English counterparts.
They weren't like actually bus loppers and stuff like that.
I had one unit of so we played Mosley, and then I had one unit of boss loppers, which was a support unit. But the primary units I had was an 8 or 9 unit or man unit of militia, English militia, and 2 10-man units of Indian fighters, which if you looked at the minis was a mix of European sailor musketeers, a couple of coppers, and some actual braves mixed into the unit.
And then
so
lined up across from you, you had Nigel and his super hot dice.
Oh my god.
He was their overall commander. Joe took the center kind of across from me. And Jay was lined up across from Mike. And if you can imagine The table is, we're trying to represent half of a circular fort in the middle of a swamp. There's a gate. If you're looking at a clock, I think like 4 o'clock and maybe 7. 4 o'clock, there's a gate that Glenn is about to charge into and just find himself completely locked out of. And at 7 o'clock, there was the Canoe of Death, which was just a barricade in front of a gap in the palisade, because historically they had not completed the palisade, and a native informer told the English where they could attack in order to hit this gap. That's kind of our
I learned that from a trivia contest question on this podcast.
that's our setup, and we just Helm's Deeped it. It was terrible. We ran headlong at that thing we started at 10, we ended at 1, like 3 hours of army scale, 600 points per side. Jay almost made it into the fort. We had a toehold a couple of times. Glenn got up on top of the wall at one brief moment before getting shot to pieces and charged. Almost knocked Mike out of the fight. And finally, Jay's guys had just had enough. They failed a strike check. Glenn was required to make a strike check, and we found out that Mosley was super dead, so he couldn't roll it.
Yeah, I only had like 2 militiamen who were like holding each other up, hobbling like Luke Skywalker Vader style back towards whatever village they'd come from.
And my guys, having been in the center, I ran Winslow over to start dealing out command points to Jay's units to help push him through the wall. And that turned into a traffic jam, and there was no way I was climbing a palisade wall into a bunch of natives. I don't care what Joe says. So once the wall got cleared, I started putting my guys up against it and climbing over. But yeah, that battle was a mess. It's a lot of fun though, and I hope that we get to run it again. So Tom, like you were saying, if we're gonna do participation games for future HMGS events, I definitely want to like tighten up the terrain a little bit and then put that one on again, because that one was hilarious.
Yeah,
I have ambitions to do it for sure. I'm going to do something.
I can get all my natives painted up. That'll provide 2 of the companies, especially if you scale it down a little bit.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, that wall is modular, so I can shrink that down to a little over half the size because of the way the math works out. Or I can actually take all the straight pieces out of it and build like a little 1-foot diameter circular fort if I want to.
But we have plenty of ideas for convention games.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of if we have the time to actually put them together.
Right. That's another reason that we might forego multi-day tournaments. That way we can do convention games one day and then tournaments the next, which means we're still running stuff the whole convention, but it's not all just standing around the tournament section.
We have Andy
Agreed.
here. Because I know we talked about this with Mitch, and he's talked about it with Firelock, and I think Mythicos is involved in how they want to do this stuff moving forward. But Andy, would you do another Ironman or attempt an Ironman, the 3 tournament kind of thing? Or would you rather do one of these like big participation games?
I would give an Ironman a shot. I don't think I want to do 2 tournaments in one day, though. So if I had been able to make it up on Thursday, I think I would have attempted the Ironman. But like Friday morning was my only time to like hit the convention floor, which I wanted to do. And I got some shopping done. And then Saturday I got breakfast with a friend who lives in the area, and then came into the convention a little bit later, right before the Sea Game tournament. So if there had been tournaments the morning before the land or sea tournaments,
I think it's exhausting to do that much. And yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens for Fallen. I know we've got plans in the works for a couple of different kind of partner ups between Firelock and Mythicos, because they're going to be running Mythic America stuff. I'm going to get a chance to do that when I'm down there on August 6th, because I'm running demos. But we'll talk more about that at the end. So I guess in kind of wrapping up, because we're going to kind of take a pause in between sections, because we have a huge event that we have been planning that Andy's coming to down at the Maritime Museum, and we'll give you some more details in a minute. But Andy, what were your biggest takeaways from Historicon? Like, what was your favorite part of it? What's the project you're most energized about heading home? Because I find that I always get excited about a ton of the stuff that I bought. You said you did some shopping. So favorite part and next project.
This is gonna sound really cheesy, and or I guess the kids say cringy nowadays, but I was genuinely surprised at how welcoming this community of players is. And I mean, I've played in plenty of tournaments for other games, and afterwards I was like, I think I like playing this with my friends. I don't think I like playing this in any sort of competitive way, but I genuinely had a blast with the games I got stomped in. I genuinely had a blast with the games where I was doing really well and my opponent wasn't, but they were still happy and cordial and having a good time too with it. So, and people wanted to, get to know me, and people were coming up and introducing themselves and asking about my lists. And other games, in my experience, aren't always like that. And the Firelock community online has been really great, but getting to meet people in person whose posts I've read and videos I've watched and podcasts I've listened to, and having everyone be genuinely really, really welcoming was a very nice change of pace from competitive games I've experienced in the past. So that was by far and away the biggest impression from Historicon, and just really cool. It made me pumped to play more games and to make more friends in the community.
I remember losing every game I played for a solid year and a half and still enjoying playing the game, which is a tribute to the game and the community. It's supposed to be fun, and it definitely is. So I'm glad you had a good time, and I hope we see you at future cons. And we're thankful you came on. And yeah, and final project. Like, what's your next project?
I got a shipwreck, which I'm excited to hobby up for some more terrain. I've been working away on, what was that? No, no. There was a booth behind the Firelock one that had some really nice resin molds of some shipwrecks.
Nice.
And I picked one of those up. Although my flute was a miscast. I got my flute at the previous Firelock, or at the previous Historicon, and gave it some extra TLC, and I think it looks great.
Yeah. Worked out great.
So I highly recommend diving into the miscast.
It is a great
if you're
source of
ever at a
ships on the
convention,
cheap.
listener.
Yeah, I picked up a Tartana from them, and I actually had to stop. And the things that they throw in that pile, I had to stop, and I was like, Mike, what's wrong with this? Rufus and Kai took it from me and went over it, and they're like, oh, I think it's this and that and the other thing, and they were completely wrong. That was all normal. There's like a tiny little crack that transferred from the mold to the ship. And Mike's like, well, can't sell that. It's going in the miscast bed.
But yeah, I'm hard at work finishing my land table. I have quite a few modular 1 foot by 1 foot squares that are kind of islandy, and getting some buildings painted up, and I have a couple other wacky ideas for adding a river to it, and yeah, so that's the big thing that I'm trying to get done, and get more games in. I'm pumped for the September tournament, so I'm definitely planning on being there.
So that's a good segue to kind of take a break, because this is a supersized podcast, as was Mitch's that he released last week. And I'm going to have to edit all the sections together because we're recording this on different days. So, Andy, thank you very much for joining us. And we hope to see you in September, and we hope to have you on again next time something big's going on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I genuinely had a blast, and I always look forward to listening. So it was great to get to be on mic with you guys.
All right, and we'll take a quick break, and then we will be right back. Welcome back from the break. At this point, those of you listening at home or in the car we'll know whether or not I've succeeded in editing disparate portions of this podcast together effectively. Big thank you to Andy for hopping onto the podcast and letting us know about his experience as a new player, and for chatting about Historicon with us, because we had a blast. At this point, we're going to cover two things. We're going to cover a big event that Glenn, Tyler, and I are going to be hosting, and which we mentioned at the top of the podcast. We're going to talk about our trivia question, and then we're going to make some announcements about upcoming events. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn and talk about just what this is all about. So Glenn, what are we doing on September 17th?
Well, a while back, I put up an idea in the Facebook group and had a bunch of people vote on it because we had a crazy scheme come into our brains. And we thought, what if we tried a destination tournament, as we're terming them, at some cool venue that isn't just like a normal game store? Not that we don't love our friendly local gaming stores, but I always hear these cool stories of like, oh, come play World War II games on this aircraft carrier or whatever. Like, and that always sounded awesome and I could never go. But what if we did that for pirate ships? Now, I started looking into it, just calling around, asking museums, calling various coastal museums, pirate museums, etc., figuring out if they have venue spaces, what it costs, etc. And one of them reached back out to me after I left a voicemail and said, we want you guys to come, and we're going to offer you a great deal to make sure that you come, because we're having a Talk Like a Pirate Day event this year to celebrate Talks Like a Pirate Day, which is normally September 19th. That's a Monday. They're doing it on Saturday, the 17th, just because, we all have to work actual jobs elsewhere. And they were very excited to have us come. So after haggling a little bit on the details, we've got that arranged. So September 17th, we are going to be going to the Calvert Marine Museum in Solomon's Island, Maryland. It's a museum about the history of the Chesapeake Bay, much of which is focused on the fishing and oystering and things like that are much more integral to the Chesapeake Bay maritime history. However, I think they've actually put in a exhibit about dinosaurs that have been found in the bay recently as like a traveling exhibit. So that'll be there as well. But the main idea is that we're going to go to this location, we play a tournament, and we're going to build time into the schedule so that everybody gets a chance to go explore the museum, because a museum ticket will be included in price of admission. So you come down, you get your 3 games of Blood and Plunder in, much like you would if you went to a convention. You get to go wander the Maritime Museum and see what they've got going on, and hopefully you get to walk away with some prizes. And additionally, because it's Talk Like a Pirate Day, the museum is very interested in having us dress up. So we are actually going to be giving a bonus to the tournament score. Not entirely sure how I'm doing that yet. Probably like -1 strike point, the way we score things, if you dress up for Talk Like a Pirate Day. And it doesn't need to be a very complicated, like genuine Renaissance fair type costume. You could just have a toy pirate vest and hat that you got at, I don't know, the dollar store. But as long as you're willing to dress up and come out for Talk Like a Pirate Day, you get bonus points on your tournament score, and you get to explore a museum about the maritime history of the Chesapeake Bay, and anything else that I'm missing, and food. We're going to include food in the cost of the admission as well, so you don't have to go off-site to try and find something.
So as we record this, I will have already posted the event itself, and we've cross-posted it to Blood and Buccaneering Across the Spanish Main. We put it in the Oak and Iron page as well, and we have it on our page and on the No Dice page. There will be links to the event, and that link will also be in the podcast posting for this. So if you go on to No Dice, No Glory, you'll find a link to it. And we'll be publishing pretty regular updates about this over the course of the next month and a half before things happen. The cost is $40. That $40 is going to be paid to me via PayPal. I promise you, I am a very reliable gentleman. I am an Eagle Scout. I actually once failed a personality test to work at Outback Steakhouse because they said I was too honest and that they didn't believe people like me existed, and so they didn't hire me. But, the joke's on them because I would have been a great seller of steaks. So regardless, you're going to send me the money. That money will, as Glenn mentioned, cover your museum tickets and passes, which we'll hand you when you check in during registration between 10 o'clock and 10:30 in the morning. It will give you admission to the museum. We're going to throw in a lunch as well, and that also gets you the entry to the tournament. Tyler, talk like a pirate day, because when I think of pirates, I usually think of you. Glenn and you both have beards, but the avatar I'm looking at on Discord even has you dressed as what I presume to be a pirate. So tell me about your long LARPing career, and if there's any costume advice you would have for aspiring pirates.
First of all, I don't LARP. I don't know where that came from. I go to run fairs and things like
You
that.
live
but
it, so you just live it.
Yeah, I don't throw fireballs though. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It is an appealing pastime. No, the costume and stuff that I have, Glenn was talking about dollar store hats and eye patches and whatnot. Costume that I have is not historically accurate, which is probably shocking if anyone's watched me argue with Liam on the Discord about historical accuracy. Yeah, I mean, pirate costumes are for the people that go to the Ren Fair, and this is kind of how I ended up in a really expensive pirate outfit. They're supposed to be the cheapest and easiest thing to put together. You can tear up the sleeves on a t-shirt and just kind of go raggedy. Like, baggy pirate thing is a look, but we're not even asking that you tear up a perfectly good t-shirt. You can go to the dollar store and grab a hat and eye patch. Or you can do, I know, Tom, I think you have a pretty significant outlay with your conquistador armor that you have coming in.
I will be wearing it to this event, yes.
What, you lost that bet a year ago, 2 years ago now?
Yeah, I just keep forgetting to pack it. I honestly, the armor is still wrapped up. I haven't even taken it apart to see if it fits. I even measured myself to get fitted for it. So
It's gonna have that authentic Spanish rust on it by the time
I will tell you flat out, like, I will be posing in the outfit. My wife will take a picture of it, and I will post it to this event's page and our page to let people get a taste of what's in store for them. If they can see me look as stupid as I've ever looked in my life.
At least I don't have the authentic Spanish, I've spent 180 degrees in the Caribbean sweat smell.
Yeah, it will. It will. Well, I don't have the full breastplate. I just have the shoulder. Like, you'll see when I post the picture, you'll get an idea. But I have that. I have the shirt. I have Viking style pants. I don't have any good shoes. Like, those are really expensive if you want to get anything authentic shoes wise. Like, I feel like it's not what you think would be the most expensive part of a costume, but oh baby, they can start at like $400, $700. Yeah, it's crazy. I'll wear boots. I'll wear boots so it looks a little less realistic. But
the biggest trick is finding a 17th century cobbler.
Everybody needs a trade.
They make shoe toppers, so you wear like loafers almost, and then they lace under your foot. And they look like a boot from the top.
Yeah, that's nuts. Well, I saw it in Colonial Williamsburg because we went there like last week, my wife and I, and we went to the cobblers, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I love this pair of shoes. It's, I just changed the buckle and I just wear this shoe every day." And they cost a lot of money, but they last a long time, which is generally the idea of products you want to keep. So, they had something right in the 1700s. I think that they made some products a little bit better. But anyway, we don't expect that level of authenticity from you. A dime store pirate hat will do. And like Tyler said, ripped up shirts are fine. I reserve the right, if I'm helping Glenn with this, if somebody comes like loaded for bear, if somebody really does it up pirate style, I think, I don't want to give somebody equal consideration if they showed up with, a Party City pirate hat as opposed to the full kit. You know what I mean? So I feel like we need to give them a couple more points. We're not going to go crazy. It's not going to tip the tournament, but, we got to make some allowances.
I think we do when we do our tournaments, we do first, second, third place. We often do a rear admiral. We always do favorite opponent. I don't think it would be too hard to put another line at the bottom of our scorecards for best dressed.
Oh, you're
It won't
right.
be
By
difficult.
vote, they could also get a prize.
And I do
All
know
right.
that a friend of the show, who shall not be named, is looking at putting together a French Marin outfit.
Ooh, okay. Nice.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I would like to point out, you mentioned loaded for bear, and it immediately popped into my head as someone who is usually walking around with a pistol or two, a saber or cutlass, depending on the day, and like 3 grenados. I would assume the museum is not going to be down with us rocking up with weapons.
No,
Yeah.
it's a
Real
kid friendly,
or
family friendly
props.
place. Yeah, so please
Correct.
no prop weapons. Thank you for making that. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
no weapons. I would have said plastic sword, but
So I will say we'll brainstorm off air, but I have some fun ideas for a kind of a cool prize for the person with the best costume. So I'm going to think about this. I might make them a terrible trophy. I might make them a good trophy because I mean I have time to order one really. But we need something befitting a pirate of the stature that might come dressed as a Marin. As loath as I am to give he who shall not be named a prize of any kind, I feel like it'll go straight to his head. But I don't know. He might get beat out. Like Andy's got some kit, so Andy's
Andy
coming.
does have kit.
And Andy has the distinction of being the first person to say yes, I'm coming. So he rocks, man. So we're hoping to see as many of you there as we can get there. There are links to a website where you can find hotels in the area. I will be staying at a hotel in the area. I'll get down there. My plan is to take off the day on Friday and get there by Friday afternoon. So if anybody's in the city and wants to have dinner together, just reach out or email me before we get there. But we'll get closer. We'll chat more when it gets closer. But we wanted to give you the rundown ASAP because this is coming up faster than we think it is. Time moves quickly.
yeah, we got this episode and one more before it.
One more. Yeah, one more.
Maybe September's, depending on how our release schedule goes.
Well,
The episode in
September.
September is congratulations for signing up. Here's what we're going to be doing when you all arrive. Because
Oh,
if
wait,
you
Yeah,
haven't
pretty
signed
much.
up by September, something's wrong. It's not going to be looking for more people.
This is August. There is only September left.
I'm also going to point out, guys, that I realize that your jobs aren't seasonal, but mine is, and I'm going to have 4 preps come September 6th, so I'm going to get blitzed. I don't know what your schedule is for Labor Day weekend, but if we don't record then, it's going to be difficult. So we'll see. We'll see how this
I
goes.
think your
All right.
definition of blitzed is different than mine.
Yes, it very much is. Very much is. I will mention, just for those of you that are very into figuring out kind of strategies, stuff like that, we will have a tournament packet up. It'll get posted in PDF form to the event.
Hear that, Joe? We're working on it right now.
If Joe makes the trip out from Oregon, we'll give him his own solid gold gilded packet. I don't think he's coming out more than once, but we were grateful to get to see him. Again, we mentioned this again after talking about it with Andy earlier. And I will also mention, it's 100 points, smaller lists. How long are the rounds, Glenn? Remind me.
Okay, so you want to talk about how we're doing special rounds?
Yeah, let's go through the rundown of the overall thing.
Okay, so part of the museum wanting us there is the fact that they want people engaged. The public is going to have access to the tournament area. So much like at a convention, you're going to have people wandering through, looking at your tables that you're playing on. Some people are going to be more familiar with this than others. They might stop and ask you some questions. So we're going to give you a little bit of extra time in your tournament games relative to what we did in the past.
I'm going to point out something really quickly before Glenn keeps going, and that is that at a tournament environment like Historicon, you will have some fun looky-loos and people that just want to see the ships and the models, and which is cool as somebody who's experienced it a lot before. But it's very different from experiencing people in the general public getting to see it. And that's where I just want to point out what a unique and interesting opportunity this is to kind of spread and share the hobby, because there's a whole bunch of people that might have a real big interest that have never thought of this kind of gaming before that get a chance to see it for the first time. So just be aware that you're ambassadors for a game, and the best way to make it grow is to show people how much fun it is. So, in encouraging you to be patient, as Glenn mentioned, we're giving you a little bit of extra time in the rounds, but so keep going. So it's 100 points, and then each of the rounds is 75 minutes, I want to say.
75 minutes. We used to do 60-minute rounds at previous Historicon and Fall-Ins, and we know that most people can finish their 100-point games in an hour. It's easy to do. They're not huge. However, what we're doing here that's weird is, it opens at 10. We want registration to begin at that time. I want to have dice rolling by 10:30. We'll have our first 75-minute round. Everybody's going to participate. After that, I'm going to be breaking the attendees into thirds, and we're going to have 4 total round time slots. But at any given point, only 2/3 of the players are going to be playing. So essentially, you'll have a bye round sometime for each of the second, third, or fourth round. And that bye round, combined with the times on either side, will give you about 2 hours to go and explore the museum without us taking a very large break where the gaming hall will look empty to all of the public and the families that are coming through. And that's partly to help the museum with the visibility that they were offering us. And it's also to make sure that
You get a chance to see the museum.
Yeah. You get a chance to see the museum while also maintaining the idea that, everybody's playing games.
We will also let you know closer to the event, like when we're going to bring in the food, stuff like that. It'll probably be like pizza and salad, a couple different things. And like you'll have a chance to eat. You'll have time to eat as well. But yeah, if you finish your games early, you're free to wander, which is normal for any kind of event. And there's plenty to see because the museum's got a lot going on. So,
As I say, it is a surprisingly large museum. Also, as someone who's super particular about their models, I'm going to try and post myself sort of up front with a demo and display table to head off most of the public who are going to be wandering around with questions and potentially small children fingers. I don't think anyone is going to touch the models on the tables. I think that should be fine. And for the times that you guys are wandering the museum or going out for lunch or anything like that, if you're away from your tables and your models, I will try, and I'm sure that Glenn and Tom will back me up on this, to have somewhere that you can store your stuff that is more or less kind of out of public view.
One of us will always be there, and I'll also point out that we will have an active demo table for the public being run at all times. So, like, I don't mind my stuff getting touched, and usually that's what we end up using. That includes like my terrain, my models, my ships, whatever. If it gets broke, I fix it. I don't care. I'm a teacher, and I use these models in large scale games with students all the time. So I'm comfortable, which means you don't have to be. So we'll leave little signs up to let people know they can look, but they can't touch. And if they want to touch or kind of look at the models, they can always just look at mine, which will be in the demo table, so you'll have no problem. So I think this is a really cool event. I'll remind you that in this podcast description, there are links to the event itself. There's links to the Calvert Museum, which has visitor information. And there will be a link to the page that shows you kind of hotel accommodations and stuff like that. Because if you want to book it, you should probably book it relatively soon. To register, you want to let us know you're going to the event, and there is a Google Forms link in the event that will ask you a couple of questions to give us a bunch of ideas about who's coming dressed, what the emails and contact info is for you, and it gives you some more specific information about where to send the $40 to be fully registered. As I get payments from people, I will email you to confirm that I have them, and I will let you know that if for some reason it looks like our numbers aren't going to hold up or some unforeseen circumstance causes us to have to cancel and kind of eat our deposit, I will refund you your $40 up until September 2nd. After that, if we can, we will, but it's possible that we may have committed a lot of money and we take the L. Because if you withdraw too late, I can't guarantee, but I'll make every effort to make sure you get paid back.
That's a big thing we want to emphasize as well. Like, the three of us are putting up our own funds as the forward deposit on this. So we need to do the ticket sales ahead of time. Normally at like a convention or whatever, we don't mind day of walk-ons. That's not the case this time. We need to have
Yeah, we need a
ahead
count
of-
because it's a venue. Think of it like a wedding or a party at one of these. We need to know how many people we've got. We need to know how much food to order, how many tables to set, and that means that we really need to solidify our numbers as September is getting rolling. Now, if you are somebody who just stumbled across this podcast or the event late and you want to email us to see if there's still space, we will make every effort to accommodate you, but you may get charged an extra couple bucks because we need to buy a couple extra supplies at the last minute, or we need to tell the venue this, that, or the other thing, get more tables, et cetera, et cetera. So if you want to come and you're in the area and you want to make the trip, try to let us know and pay as soon as you can. And we'll be posting regular updates and reminders on our Facebook page. I'm going to start an email distribution list just as soon as we have people. So I'll send you out some regular updates once every week or so, 2 weeks, just to let you know, hey, here's the running list of people. Here's what to expect. Don't forget to book your hotels, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
So
This is a trial balloon. We haven't done this before. I don't think anybody in our groups have done this before. So we're putting it out there to see if it works. If this is a smashing success, we're definitely going to try and do it again. Probably at various other venues. I don't think we'll be coming back to the Calvert Marine every year.
But this might be something we do in other locations. I will also say to kind of assuage to assuage the fear of anybody who's like, oh no, they've never done any events before. I'd say we've certainly run tournaments and events at HMGS and at cons. We've set up stuff through gaming stores. And I will also say from a logistical standpoint, as a teacher who's run Model UN for the past 5 years, I've helped guide my students through the process of hosting an event with guest speakers, booked venues, catered food for upwards of 170 people. So I'm familiar with how logistics work. I'm confident that this should go off without a hitch. As long as we hit our numbers, we are good to go, and we are happy to have as many people as we can fit in the space. So if you know this is something you want to do, again, register early, check the Facebook links, look at the links in the podcast, and if you have any questions, email us because we will get right back to you and we'll troubleshoot any kind of problems you may have. So with that, I think we're going to jump to the final piece here, other than announcements, which is the trivia. So I will point out that we did record a lost episode, as we have a habit of doing when we're under the crunch. And we, so this is the second time reading through this for us, but it'll be the first time that you hear it. So we already rolled dice on this and we have a winner for those of you who tuned in last time, but I'm going to go ahead and read through this and we will announce the next question. So I came up with the question last time, so I'm going to go ahead and read this. All right. The rules were you had to email talesofthesale@gmail.com before we recorded. We made announcements about that, and we got quite a few responses. The prize is furnished by me. It's a custom treasure chest objective and a blister of the person's choice. So the question was, beginning his career around 1705 as the captain or master of the Spanish ship Ave Maria y las Animas, this corsario would grow in reputation steadily over the course of the wars that plagued Europe and the West Indies during the early 18th century. Considered at the time to be as popular and famous as Sir Francis Drake and Blackbeard, he would be made a noble and amass such a fortune as to be declared the richest man in the Canary Islands. He is one of a handful of real-life pirates to not die a violent death, but instead was celebrated in his hometown enough times during his funeral procession to see it stopped 8 times. 2 questions. What is the name of this famous Spanish commander, and what is carved on his family tombstone in Seville? The answer was Amarapargo, and his tombstone has an engraved family shield, and under it is a skull winking his right eye with 2 crossbones. I believe the winner even let us know some of the engravings underneath it and some of the history of the tombstone. I believe they've even been to see it. The winner this time around was Fernando Arteaga, who was actually one of our big winners at Historicon, which we mentioned earlier. So I've been in contact with Fernando, and he's getting himself a treasure chest and a blister of his choice, which I'll hopefully mail out before this gets published. So
Before we go
this
on to this time,
go for it.
before we go on to this time, it would be remiss of me, and I think that Mitch would appreciate if I mentioned that after we recorded that episode where we asked that trivia question, I wrote up an article on the No Dice, No Glory site based on our preview of the Raise the Black stuff that covers Amaro Pargo's privateers coming up in the Raise the Black supplement and the new Guardacosta faction in the Raise the Black supplement. There's everything that you Spanish players need to jump in and start playing Senor Pargo.
So we have that post on our Facebook page, but if you just go Google No Dice, No Glory and Spanish, I'm sure it'll be the first thing that pops up.
Yeah, it gives you the whole preview of everything, because we actually spent a long time talking about it in the Lost podcast. But what are you gonna do?
If you want to see the numbers written down in front of you,
Yeah,
where to go.
We need to release those Lost podcasts as like a B-sides and rarities.
I don't know that people want to listen to us that badly. All right, I tried to be really tricky this time, and I came up with another question. I've mostly been coming up with the questions because, am I the only person with a history degree? I got you guys beat on that, right?
Yeah, I don't have a degree in this.
In math or chemistry and physics.
That's right. Institutions say I know more, even though I know that's a lie. All right, so I've been tasked with coming up with another question, and I decided to theme it around natives because we've spent a lot of time with Joe Forrester, and we've loved reading his book, and Lee. So the rules again for this coming month will be to email the answer to talesofthesail, all one word, at gmail.com before the next time we record. We will post a reminder with about 48 hours to go. I'll set a reminder for myself. The prize is a blister of Braves and a native commander. The question: the Treaty of Fort Stanwix was signed between the newly formed United States and a coalition of native tribes. It established and recognized that both the United States and this native tribe were separate sovereign nations. It is among the first treaties ever signed by the United States. What was the name of the native coalition of tribes the treaty was signed with? And this is really important because we're very particular about it. We're looking for the name these tribes use for themselves and not the name the French assigned them used in common texts. So you might, off the top of your head, know a tribe name that you are going to toss out there, but that would not be the correct answer necessarily. So do your research carefully, because we're looking for the name of the native coalition of tribes, but we're not looking for the name in common usage. It would be the name that they would have referred to themselves today, because they do still exist. They're in upstate New York. So I've given you some hints. I think you can find it. I'm confident we're going to get a whole pile of good answers. I'm sure Brian Reed will get it right.
I want to give one tip because I think we discussed it the last time. Treaty of Fort Stanwix. Lots of documents got signed at Fort Stanwix, including multiple treaties. So make sure you got the right one. You want the one between
the United States
and
the coalition of native tribes. Yes, that's a key hint right there, because timing and names matter, don't they?
They do.
So we'll leave it at that. So I think this is, I don't know. We'll find out how tricky this is when we start getting the answers rolling in next week. But I'm curious to see how people do with this. Glenn, of course, thinks it's too tricky, but I like making things difficult for people. So I'm happy.
I was about to say, hey, remember that time when I was like, let's make super easy answers so I can just give prizes away to everybody?
And then I was
Tom,
like, no.
No, I paid for my history degree.
Darn right. All right, so let's go down the list here. We'll start with Tyler. We'll just go Tyler, Glenn, me, Tyler, Glenn, me.
So the news and upcoming events.
Yes.
All right. So in news, Andrew Vogel, he's a friend of the show. I hung out with him at Adepticon. He was there at Historicon with us. He has opened a new gaming store called Bazooka Games. It's serving Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He himself is former military. He wanted to do something for the guys that are down there. And from talking to him, it seems like a freaking awesome store. I kind of want to go check it out sometime.
Yeah,
But
I've been
he's
seeing
got-
the pictures. It looks great.
Yeah,
was
he's got that
saying-
opened and will be stocking Blood and Plunder.
All right. Jason Klotz still has the new Oak and Iron fan site, timberandsale.com. Spell it out, timber, A-N-D, sale, S-A-I-L, like we have our sale. So go over there for all of the newest Oak and Iron stuff. He's inventing new things, adding cards for small ships. I think he's got 3D print files if you're looking for that kind of stuff for the said small ships that Firelock doesn't make. It's a great place to go. It's a great resource for the community. So if you play Oak and Iron, that is the place to hang out.
NashCon 2022 has a Blood and Plunder Land and Sea tournaments August 22nd in Nashville. NashCon 2022. That is coming up, and we should have this released in time for you guys to have some notice. So if you are in the area and you've been thinking about going to NashCon, check it out and look for their event. Tyler, critical hit. You want Glenn to take that one?
I was going to say Glenn can probably take that one.
And then you do E, yeah.
Yeah, back to us organizing tournaments. I literally organized this one today. There's a critical hit event at the store, Critical Hit Games, in Abingdon, Maryland, August 27th. Haven't exactly figured out what the event is going to be. It's probably going to be my convention game that I want to run. So a pirate raid on a Spanish port, a 2-part game involving both a ship sea battle kind of amphibious operation thing and then a desperate struggle on land for the Spanish to keep all of those doubloons that they've got. So if you're in the area, come swing by. It's just meant to be a small event. We might be doing Oak and Iron demos if we have enough experienced players there that can assist me with that. But it's going to be a good time.
All right.
Tyler, Talk Like a Pirate Day.
Yeah, so Talk Like a Pirate Day, September 17th. Well, the actual day is the 19th. We're holding our event on the 17th. We talked at you guys at length about this. Show up, dress up. We're going to be in Solomons in Maryland at the Calvert Marine Museum. Check out the museum. Send us an email. Let us know that you're coming. Sign up on Facebook. Do all of that stuff. We'll get you on the mailing list.
Talking, and I totally forgot to mention that they have, I think, 2 lighthouses. Well, I think there's one on site, but they also just took control of another one like down the bay a little bit. So
See,
there is a lighthouse on site you can look at. Great photo opportunities.
They're raiding lighthouses. Like they took control of another one. They're pirates. They're like us. They also have, I think, one of the last operational skipjacks, which is a fishing vessel that was very important to the Chesapeake.
Oh yeah, they do boat tours. So
Mhm.
if you get
cool.
your 1:00 game done real fast, you could probably make the boat tour and be back in time for prizes.
Yeah, go sailing.
Yeah. All right, the last 2 I'll take, I guess. So I had long conversations with Nelson at Mythicos. I got to demo Mythic Americas, their new game. I'm going to start painting up my natives. But I'm also running Blood and Plunder demos down at Mythicos in Mahwah, New Jersey. That is on Saturday, August 6th, and I'll be there from 11 a.m. until 6 p.m. Weird fact, for those of you who are really curious about me, my dad is showing up to this. So he was so excited about about me talking about Historicon that he's like, I actually am looking for something to do that day, so I want to come down and see you do a demo. So that's going to be real weird. But yeah, Dad will be there. I'll make sure I take pictures of it in case you're not going to get a chance to go. But it's going to be kind of an open gaming thing. So I will have a demo table set, but I will also have 2 tables set up for people to play. So if you have models and want to come, you have the option. Nigel will not be there because he's in Florida. He's licking his wounds after the beating he took at Historicon. And
It's a psyop.
it's a psyop. So I was waiting for you not to be here, Nigel. So I will be there, and this should come out, the good Lord willing, probably Tuesday. So hopefully you have a couple days, if you've heard this, to hear it and come down. If you are in North Jersey or New York, I would love to see you. And last,
I announced that I have an unscheduled road trip.
Unscheduled road trip. Just bring the kids. Just bring Alice. Alice is really balanced. She's
Nothing
the
like
best.
a 4-hour car ride with kids.
Yeah, it's the way I relax. So last thing I'll mention is I did get to do a demo for Andrew Galbury and Chris Retz and the whole crew at the Uxbridge Historical Gaming Club. Their store is called Great Stories, and they had mentioned their interest in running an October event. So I'm going to reach out to them between this getting released and probably, the beginning of September, pick a day that works for them in October and host something. So if you're in the Boston area, I'm going to be making the hike up there, and I'm probably going to be, getting in on Friday night, setting up Saturday morning, and seeing if we can get 8 to 10 players, which will be awesome. It'll be the biggest local thing in New England that we've ever had for Firelock. So
We know of.
that we know of. If you hear this podcast, if it reaches you and you're holding games, please reach out to me. I'd love to come and make the trip.
If we know about you, we can tell other people about you, and then you get new players, and that's always a good thing.
Exactly.
You'd be surprised how many people came up to me at Historicon and they're like, "Oh yeah, I live just on the other side of like whatever city," and it's like you're half an hour. I found a new player in Frederick, like 30 minutes from me, who's interested. I mean, he's a BattleTech player, but that's another gaming buddy, right there. Like just by talking.
I think I have to mention this. One of my favorite moments from Historicon, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself because we're kind of recording some things out of sequence. But while I was playing in the Sea tournament, a guy came up with his dad watching it, and he's like, "Wow, this is really cool. I was thinking about getting into this." And I was like, "Well, where are you coming from?" Which is interesting, like a question I usually don't ask people. But and he said, "Oh, I'm coming from Brewster." And I was like, "Okay." And I think Glenn or Tyler gave me this like look. And I said, "How long you lived there?" And he's like, "Oh, 4 years." And I'm like, "Well, I've been teaching there for 16, so, if you went through the school system, I'd probably know who you were. But I'd love to give you a demo." And he'd be the closest player that I have, other than my regular crew of gamers like Shane and Rod and Tucker. Because I have friends in the area who have armies, but they've been so busy with work and kids that they barely get a chance to get out. So it was cool to meet another player down at Historicon who lives literally 15 minutes away from me. So with that, I think we wrap it up. This is going to be a jumbo episode based on our recording stuff. And I guess Glenn, take us out.
All right. Well, again, thanks everybody. It's always good to talk to you, and we can't do it without you, the player base. We love seeing you at the events, and we hope to see you at the one that we're trying and putting all this work in to get going. And if you're not on the East Coast, we're sorry. Maybe someday we can take this on the road, but in the meantime, thanks for listening anyway.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.